Okay, brilliant. Okay, so Callum Burns from Arup, who is I've got the pleasure of working with at the moment a little bit on transparent route upgrade, and Matty Davies, who's Network Rail, and I've had the pleasure of working with him in the past. There we are. So if you can present, and I'll any questions in the chat, and we'll capture those at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, David. I'll set a stopwatch. Afternoon, everyone. So yeah, as David kindly said, I'm Callum Burns, engineer at Arup, and had the pleasure of working on the Headbolt Lane scheme. So Arup had picked up the Grit 4 design from Grit 3 in 2020, and then seen it through to delivery with the help of books in October 23. So I've just got a visual of the station there on screen. We'll move on to the next slide. So I'll just pull together a rough agenda. So a bit of project introduction, a bit of the why, which I think will be quite important, general overview of the scheme, and then Matty's going to help me out with some interfaces we've got with Kirkby Station and the wider network. And then, yeah, questions put in the chat as we go. Happy to take them if you want to shout out, but yeah, we'll have some time at the end as well. So I guess start off with a bit of a project location. Just got a map here. So about 6 miles northeast of Liverpool is a place called Kirkby, and currently I've just traced on there the existing route. You've got a route that goes up towards Wigan, and a route that goes to Liverpool, and the two routes are separated at Kirkby. A bit more of a site map there. So you can see we've got Kirkby at the bottom of the screen coming from Liverpool, and then up to Wigan and Manchester. And then, you know, some of the key interfaces I'm going to discuss is this overbridge here, a couple of existing underbridges, and then, like I said, there's the position of the new station. So I thought I'd start with a bit on the why. You know, as we're all engineers and designers, it's sometimes quite easy just to jump into a project and just start flying on. But I think the why, especially in this case, is quite important. So I've got a few quotes there. So Metro Mayor Steve Rotherham has an ambition to create a Merseyrail for all, which is a commitment to connecting underserved communities to the Merseyrail network. So a lot of this is you know trying to get more people using rail. And one of the key aims that I think Steve Rotherham has is to do with access for all, which we'll see later in the slide, where we've got a level access design at Headbolt Lane, so it's obstacle free. And yeah, I think it's something that a lot of the wider network and network rail projects can learn a lot from. The Merseyrail system itself is really good. It's almost like a TfL style of system, where from the bus network to the train network, everything's quite integrated. And yeah, so I guess some of the pieces that I've just put in there. So the Liverpool City region received 172.5 million in capital grant. So part of this was the Headbolt Lane scheme as part of the Transforming Cities Fund. And then, you know, as I touched on, the priorities with the funding was improving and expanding the transport network, improving the appeal of public transport. So that's like smarter ticketing, almost like an Oyster system, and then intervening for health and well-being. So some of the projects outside of rail is like cycle routes, trying to get more and more people using sustainable travel. And then I won't touch on it too much, but then it's also integral to part of the future Skelmersdale scheme, which I found a fact today, where it's one of the largest towns in the UK that doesn't have a major railway system. So as part of delivering Headbolt Lane, it ties into almost like the first pitch of Skelmersdale, where they've currently got a bus route in place between Headbolt Lane and Skelmersdale to try and build a bit of a business case up for the scheme. So just got an existing line diagram here, which shows, like I said, so this is the Merseyrail network at the left-hand side and the Northern Rail network to the right, which is separated by Overbridge 57. So currently you've got two existing buffer stops separating the two, with passenger access between platforms 1 and 2. And then the single line that passes over Underbridge 56, Underbridge 55, and then carries on up towards Rainford. So a little bit on the route requirements. So the route requirements, the infrastructure provide double track between Kirkby Station and Headbolt Lane, supporting 4 trains per hour. Headbolt Lane will become the new terminal station, replacing what is at Kirkby at Overbridge 57. The S&C units to be located as close to Kirkby Station as possible. The removal of the buffer stops at Kirkby Station, so it becomes a through route, and the reinstatement of the platform 1 and platform 2. So there's two separate ELRs, one for the Merseyrail network and one for the Northern network, so WKL2 and WJK, and they'll remain disconnected from each other via buffer stops. This was then later changed where the separation remained at Kirkby for the ELRs, but the buffer stops obviously still at Headbolt Lane. So then there's just the proposed line diagram. So you can see a couple of the names have changed, so it becomes Headbolt Single at the left-hand side. And then the S&C, which is, it's 146 metres east of where the new signal is at Overbridge 57. And this is to do with an EBI track 400 system. So I don't know if anyone's come across this in the past, but it's almost like a jointless system. So where the S&C practical, we want it closest to bridge as we can. That was limited by the position of, from a signalling design perspective. And then the lines going up to Headbolt Lane are 40 mile per hour. And then you can see sort of the two lines here virtually connect. I mean, there's a vertical difference, so that if a future Skelmersdale scheme does come through, you can connect the two up and remove what is platform 3. So I'll start at Overbridge 57, which is, I guess, the first piece. So I've got a couple of pictures here from a plan perspective. So low mileage side of the Overbridge, like I said, was the Merseyrail network, where you can see the existing buffer, the platform, and what is the third line DC power. And then the high mileage side, the northern side, you can just see the platform for access between the two platforms. And then just an easy diagram there just to show what is the almost defining point between the two networks. So part of the design development we had in this area was, yes, you can just connect the two tracks up, but then you've got this platform that was in the way that needs to be cut back. And then obviously it's an arch structure, so there's issues from a gauging perspective. And one of the, as the design was developing, because there was no track beneath that structure, we weren't able to get SEO files. So we was able to use some point cloud survey, which for this area as part of the Skelmersdale scheme that was developed at Gritford is quite a lot of point cloud survey that was developed. And it's really useful for when we're cutting sections and almost just developing the options. So if you join the two tracks up, what does that look like from a gauging perspective? And we was able to get the 100 mil gauging clearance through this structure. And then you can just see why the platform at the bottom there needed to be cut back. So that's been cut back sufficiently so you can still get your gauge clearance. And then just a picture of when it was all constructed. So the lines connected up, the new signal that's mounted to the bridge there, and then the platform cut back, which has got a fence so the public can't try and pass through. And then I just thought I'd touch a little bit on almost like a bit of a carbon saving. So the existing, what was the northern platform, there was an original plan to remove this in its entirety. But then we was able to do a gauging assessment from this platform to the proposed design, and it was gauge clear. So rather than having to go through and demolish that platform, it can now be used as almost like visual inspections. I think it was used during the construction for some of the mounting of materials. So that was just an area where instead of going through and sending a dozer, I guess part of the blockade, trying to remove that platform, we was able just to value engineer that out of the construction program. So one of the key interface we had was with Underbridge 55. So this is an existing single span that passes over the country road here. And the idea was obviously as we're putting a twin track railway in, we needed to expand it. I mean, you can sort of just see there where go to the next slide. On the historic map, you can see it was a twin track railway in the past. Let's get back again. So you can see where that span was, but the redundant span of where we were putting a proposed structure needed to be replaced. So again, using the point cloud, instead of putting a standard 1976 foot in, where we'd have to then replace all spans, we was able to retain what is span free by putting a widened 6 foot across that structure, so that we just needed to do some minor structural work to what was the existing span historically, and then just expanded that structure to the high mileage side over the bridge, over the road, and then the twin U deck there in the final proposed. So just by, instead of going to a standard 6 foot, standard design, by challenging what was done at Group 3 and just making that slightly wider, we was able to reduce a load of the civil engineering works cost. Again, that carbon challenge that we should all be trying to achieve. And it's also probably worth noting that across this structure, we implemented guardrails. So this is because either side of the bridge is quite a steep earthwork. So just from a risk mitigation point of view, putting those guardrails in just avoids any future potential risk and derailment. And then just got a couple of photographs there of where the deck was being craned in. So the main road that was blocked during the construction. Again, just as the decks were put in place and the sleepers were starting to be laid. So go on to the embankment widening. So the existing track sits, it mirrors around the scheme, but generally speaking, it's in the centre. So as part of the widening of the corridor, there was some embankment widening that was required. Because you can see, it's quite steep either side, and the need to put a walkway at one side of the railway. So that's just a typical section there showing some of the proposals that was put in place. And then I guess the main bit, so the Headbolt Lane station. So the proposed arrangement, we're putting 3 new platforms in. So 2 would serve Merseyrail and 1 would serve Northern trains. And as I said earlier, this is step-free access using the Class 777 vehicle. So Class 777 will operate on the Merseyrail network, with the Northern trains just, general sectional appendix stock. And it will serve as an interchange facility. So, an integrated bus, train, facility with car parking for 300 vehicles. So trying to get that social piece of bringing people in using the train system, trying to get some carbon off the roads. And all 3 platforms had a friction buffer stop at the terminus of the platform. So just put a couple of visualizations in there so you can see between where the bus and the car park is, you've got level access all the way through to your platforms, which I think is quite key from a mobility perspective, and something I guess historically we've not looked at in too much. We generally just potentially put a platform in and not worry about that interface of how you get actually from your car or the bus to the train. I think this is something that Mersey Travel are probably quite far ahead of. This is integral to their business development and any new station that's being put in place. And then just the car park area, where I think a lot of the design was done so to accommodate what is the bush route, to try and get people, switching the mindset of travelling to the first and last mile by the bus. I'll just put a little clip, some drone footage that I found online from Simon Rhodes. So this just is a nice piece of, so you can see from above what the station looks like. You see that you've got the bus connection at the left hand side, the 2 Mersey travel platforms, and then at the top there the northern platform. And it's probably worth noting that you can see that there's quite a substantial vertical difference there between platforms 1 and 2 and 3, and this is because the designs through this area is in a cutting. So if a future scheme was to come through, there would be some work required to remediate that. And then there's an interface there that we had with the adjacent freight line, with a fence line in between. So this was one of the constraints we had in the scheme, with trying to keep sufficient distance between our new station and that buffer stop there. And I guess that was one of the defining points of where the station was to be located, because the Fox required this full standage length. It's got a section here of what platforms 1 and 2 is. So you have, once you get back through the station, we're back on the standard 6 foot, where we've got the Aqua Mini Stirling catch pits going through, and then just a standard concrete platform either side. So the proposal we had from the X and Ys was 735 910, because instead of going for 730 915, because of the level access, trying to keep that limit, and I guess also a construction tolerance in there. If you go to the upper threshold of 915 730, sometimes you lose that tolerance when the construction team are building it. So almost building the 5 mil tolerance into the design just helps from a construction perspective. And then just photo there when, as it was being constructed. And then platform 3, so this is the northern platform, and one of the interesting features of this was it was an EPS material, so expanded polystyrene, and this is so we're almost future-proofing the railway. So if a Skelmersdale or a future scheme comes through, it's much easier to demolish this platform and take it out of use rather than putting concrete in and a load of carbon to then remove that platform. So I don't know if that's something that's been used in the wider network, but it's definitely something new to me. And yeah, some of the pictures there. I mean, because from first glance, it doesn't look too much different to what is a conventional platform. And then, yeah, looking back, so one of the key constraints we had from a design perspective was the interface we had with Kirkby Station. So the key interfaces we had, there was an ongoing PTI, sort of passenger train interface scheme going across the Merseyrail network. And there was also a recent permanent way scheme that had undertaken COPA mods. So from a value engineering perspective, we didn't want to then come through with a Headbolt lane scheme and have to redo all the COPA mods that have previously been done. And then there was also the interface we had with the existing third rail. So from a power perspective, the original scheme was to extend the third rail all the way through to the new station at Headbolt Lane. But then post-Grit 4, it was decided that this could become a trial site for the Class 777 battery power. So between Kirkby Station and Headbolt Lane, the train's operated by battery, which is a really new system and something I've not experienced before. I think it's still in its sort of testing and monitoring phase, but it seems to be working fairly well. I think they're picking up data, and potentially it could be something that they expand in the future to use on the wider Merseyrail network. So I'll put a slide in here, the vertical design. So we basically had to regress what was the design for the PTI scheme as close as possible, so that we weren't scuppering any of the X and Y values that have been implemented. And this also then shows where the two existing buffer stops are either side of Overbridge 57. And then just put on here the existing and proposed XY offsets. So generally, the proposed Y can't be below. Matty, correct me, but I think was it 880 940?
Correct, yeah, 880 to 940.
And that is because of the way that the level access works. It almost defeats the point in having level access by having a really large step. And then just put a piece on there about the power supply. So yeah, post-Grit 4, it was agreed that the third rail's power supply wouldn't be extended, and I guess quite rightly there's safety implications of extending that. And with the trial site of using the battery packets, it's quite an innovative system, and potentially it could be a future of getting to the more remote networks where you don't want to do a load of electrification. So from a value engineering perspective and building a business case, it could be something we learn from. And then, so yeah, a bit more on the interface with Kirby Station. I'll let Matty talk through.
Yeah, cheers, Callum. So for those who don't know me, I'm Matthew Davies. So I was the track PE from detailed design onwards, took over towards the end of ES4 or Old Money Grip 4 from the Birmingham team that we had that was running with it. So I'll just talk a little bit around the interfacing scheme. So the PTI project, which was actually coming towards the end when Headbolt Lane was starting, was basically a project to replace the old Class 507, 508 stock, which is the left-hand photo on the bottom. And obviously it's now been replaced with the new Class 777, which is shown at the bottom right. So again, as Callum's touched on some points, Mersey Travel, they wanted this wider vision of a step-free access at all stations, and obviously then going on to the train itself. So as part of that, they had to achieve PRM leveled access, which has obviously stringent limits compared to normal stepping distances at other stations. So there's a tolerance of there can only be up to a 50 mm step from the platform edge to the actual train step and going onto the train itself, and there can only be a 75 mm gap horizontally from the train edge, step edge to the platform edge. So Mersey Travelling got Stadler on board to help design this new train, and one of the key things what they've done as well is they've lowered the floor height originally from the old Class 507, 508s by 186 mm to help achieve this leveled access. And then the other system they've installed is this intelligent footstep. And basically when the train is in transit and moving, the footstep is not sticking out, it goes back into the train, and when it pulls in to the stations and the doors are actually operated, the step physically moves out towards the platform, and has got sensors on it, so it knows where to stop. So the correct PRM tolerances, providing your platform's built correctly to the right X and Y height, obviously then it'll go as close as needed to ensure the leveled access is achieved. So as touched on by Callum, the Y values for all platforms had to be between 880 and 940. Obviously, if it's outside of that, then it fails the leveled access. And they have been going out testing this everywhere. And the only probably key thing to mention is more to do with the X value. So the X value range that they give us at the time as PTI was 730 to 821, which the reason that range was first put together was to match your group standards of 7073, where as we're getting to a tighter radius, the X, your design X goes out to 821 for a tight track radii. I think it's 180 off the top of my head, or 160, and the 730 was just to keep in line with standards. They have done some more testing, and basically what was said was if you wanted to go tighter than 730, it was basically get gauge engineer approval. So there is instances where the X value is tighter than 730 down towards 700, and the level that it's still completely fine. The train is quite gauge friendly, so that always helps. So there was work done across the whole Merseyrail network, because obviously every single Class 507, 508 train was going and being replaced. And this, as it says there, so there's work carried out at 96 out of 136 platforms. This, ranged between just track tamping or copa adjustments, or sometimes both were required to obviously get the correct X and Y values. There was some really high Y values, and I think that was more to do with the Class 507, 508 having quite a high footstep, probably compared to some of the older stock, and with it being a more closed network, they were probably more built to suit that rolling stock rather than any others that obviously ran on the network. So the left-hand diagram is just basically shows in yellow the full Merseyrail network and shows you all the stations. Next slide, please, Callum. So yeah, so just talk a bit more about this footstep. So there's two photos on the bottom. So the one bottom right is the Class 777, as was a mock-up which was put at Lime Street, so you could actually go and see it and see what it was going to look like in the future. And the one on the left is a train that the Top Great Angler, so they've decided to look at this as well, although they've took a slightly different approach to Merseyrail. So they've got Stadler to build them, I think the Class 745 and 755 stock, which again will have the same leveled access as the Merseyrail, and it's a very similar train. It's got obviously the same technology with the footstep, and it comes out to meet the platform. The difference in what they've done is they haven't gone and upgraded every single platform across their networks. They've just gone, it's going to give us benefits, highlighted where they've actually got it, and then they're going for a more slower long-term approach of bringing it in, whereas Mersey Travel have done all the leveled access before they actually started using the train. And as I touched on, you know, they've got the low floor height, and like I said, the footstep has sensors and it physically pulls into the platform and moves towards the platform. And like you said, it can, again, if they're not in the X and Y range, it doesn't mean the step doesn't work. It still works. It still knows where the platform is. So like I said, even, you know, from the Top Great Angler point of view, they're widely using this, and there's reduced stepping distances. So again, there's benefits for it to be used regardless of what state your platforms are in. It's going to give you some benefits. Next slide, please. Hopefully this video works. This was taken actually at Kirby Station. If it doesn't work, I've got it separately, Callum, but
I'll bring it over from the slideshow.
Yeah, this was taken at Kirby Station just to show you it in action. So obviously the doors have been operated, footstep comes out, and as the doors are opening, and there you go, you get your leveled access. And again, when the driver is pulling off, again, once he operates to shut the doors shut, the step comes in, and the train drives away. So that was taken, like I said, actually at Kirby Station itself before Headbolt Lane happened. So that was because they went around testing this in lots of places. I suppose just a quick one, the only, like I said, downfall, I think I touched on it with the X value, at Birkenhead Central, we have got a radius down to 180, and the X values of 821 with the footstep probably still, it doesn't quite give you the required horizontal gap. So we're currently just looking into that now. So that's been the only place where there's been an issue on the Merseyrail network, but then it's the only place that's got a really tight platform built against the track radius. So yeah, we're currently reviewing what to do there, but it'll probably be that the X value for that particular station, the range that the maintainer will have to keep it within, will be a lot tighter than compared to all the other stations on the network. So I suppose the good thing is as well, you know, the X and Y ranges are a lot more flexible compared to your group standards, what we have today of 730, 745 and 890 to 915. Yeah, so that was a whistle stop tour on the new train. I'll take the next slide. And any questions? Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Matty.
Yeah, thanks, Matty and Callum, for that. There is a couple of questions in the chat, and anyone else, please feel free to put some in there or raise your hands as we go along. So I think Lee Yan Chu was putting a question about have the designs accounted for the future passive provision for Skemmerdale rail link and or footbridge between platforms 1 and 2.
It's one we were me and Matty were discussing actually the last week or so. So I guess from a provision perspective, I think there's plenty of adjacent land if footbridge was required, but the design for that and actual location wasn't part of the scope to look at. But yeah, it's a valid point. If the Skelmersdale rail link does happen, they would need provision for a footbridge between what is platform 1 and 2.
Okay, thank you. Steve Bones put a question in about what is the design life of the EPS platform. I think that's expanded polyester platform, and what is the passenger loading it is rated to?
I'll have to take that one away. But yeah, it's a fair comment. I think the design life is fairly generous. I don't think there's a huge compromise on, you know, between the concrete and the EPS. Yeah, I'll make a note. If you could put your email address in, I can send over the response.
Any other questions from anyone? I can ping some in whilst we're waiting. If you don't mind.
That'll be some about the battery. Has anyone come across the battery system before?
Oh yeah, David's put some in. Well, so he's got something about we have step-free access at the rear of platform 1 to no footbridges needed. All right, okay. I think you're probably responding to a previous question. So what were we saying about the battery? Sorry, Callum.
I'm just So from my perspective, it's quite a new, innovative system of trying to get a train from A to B. I don't know if there's any other projects going on in the wider network outside of Mersey Rail that's looking at the battery system. Just an open question, really.
Blimey, you're questioning people on the call. Okay, that's the reverse.
It's a bit. I should say, just to touch on, I suppose, a bit more on the battery technology as well. They again, so that like I said, I think price wise and money wise, it's a lot more expensive than what it would have been to put third rail in long term. However, like Callum touched on, they've got a wider plan, and this new train is also you know, can be adapted to work under overhead, so it's got room to fit a pantograph on the top, because Mersey Rail want to expand their network. They want to be able to run to Preston, they want to be able to run to Wigan, and they want to be able to run, obviously, the future SCEM project, if that happens, and they've talked about whether they put overheads up on that section. And you know, there's they've got a few other places that they've got this wider network that they want to try and run to, and the new extending the third rail was not going to be easy and challenging through the ORR. So that was one thing they've looked at. And the technology, they've currently installed some ASDO beacons for the train to automatically switch from third rail to battery near Kirby Station. Although I do believe they're not actually product approved for that use, but that is currently what they're using, and it's actually working. But they are going through the product approval process to get them formally approved for that use.
Okay, I think people are responding to questions in the chat, so I'll probably leave those as they're developing. Just a quick one on the actual new vehicle, Matty, that you obviously the level boarding. You seem to be saying that that's giving you a bit more flexibility with offsets and compliance. Is that right?
I'd say you've got more. Well, yeah, you've got more. So the way we've eventually, you know, it was the PTI project, rather than, you know, going for full compliance everywhere, it was looked at from a more, I suppose, cost benefit point of view on if you're within that range, you know, technically we're doing, you know, minor upgrades and not substantial. So obviously we've got the group standards, which tells anything substantial, then you do a bit of a workshop to work out, you know, whether it's reasonable opportunity to bring it to fully compliant. And I suppose just even long term from a maintenance point of view, you know, our tolerances are very tight. So if they'd have built it with tighter tolerances, like I said, the maintainer even said to me the first time he'll hear about it, it'll be headline news in the Liverpool Echo. So he doesn't want that to happen. So obviously, at least it gives them a little bit more flexibility. You know, they'll platform gauge these platforms probably once every 12 months. If it's dropped outside group standards, you know, which was probably more likely, they'd be going in a lot more frequent, whereas the wider range for the leveled access, at least that, you know, that is still going to work. That's probably where I was coming from.
Okay. And do you see this kind of technology being used more and more? You said it's being used elsewhere, was it Angular?
Yeah, by the top, great Angular, yeah. I mean, so from a personal point of view is I wrote my uni dissertation on it, so I can't understand, if you're ordering a new train, I can't understand why you wouldn't order it with this new intelligent footstep. I mean, it gives you better gauging. I mean, how many times usually it's the footstep that's caused us lots of issues on old rolling stock, you know, whereas this, when you assess it, obviously you don't take the footstep into account because it goes in, it's not physically there. It only comes out to meet the platform when it's operated. And then obviously when that is operated, it's got the sensors and it knows, moves out towards the platform. So, like I said, there's plenty of old rolling stock, and platforms are all different heights and offsets, whereas this is going to close the gap regardless what them heights, what the height and offset is. So I can only see it as, it could be a wider benefit for the network if it was used, with any new rolling stock orders going forward.
Okay, I'm trying to. I know there are. See, there's questions. I think it feels like there's answers to questions above. But David Kennedy's got one in about is gauging carried out in a fail mode for the footstep?
It's a good question. It hasn't been, no.
I do wonder if there's is there potentially a procedure in place where the guard, or if there's a train dispatch, would, almost like in the Class 390 Pendolino, look at that fail mode, and I guess the train would dispatch with that in fail mode.
Yeah,
Operationally, it could fail while it's in motion, but
it could. And I was going to say, but I know, there was no gauging carried out with the footstep actually being out, because again, that, I suppose the only way you could do it is it being fully extended out, because obviously at different stations it'll come out differently compared to the X value. But yeah, it certainly wasn't done as the PTI project, so I can only imagine, like you said, that's more of an operation. If they don't go in, then what do they do? Scott will see Scott's answering it, so Scott will probably know better than me.
So Scott's come with it. Yeah, there's the question about the fault.
I seen one in the chat from Matt Benson. So just,
I missed that, sorry.
Yeah, are ramps still needed for wheelchair users? No, is the answer. No, there's no ramps at all, not needed across the Merseyrail network once this train is fully in use for anything. And that was the main idea, what they were going for.
We're going step. Mad now. Is the step program per station, or is it reliant on the likes of proximity sensors?
It's not, the step isn't programmed. It physically, when the doors are operated, the step just moves out towards the platform. So it just has sensors on the step, and it just moves towards the platform. And obviously it's got this certain range that it can move, that, of how close, but it just moves towards the platform. It's not programmed as such that station, it has to move this much. It just automatically does it.
Any more questions? Have either of you been on the service here? Yeah, I'm not, just out of interest.
I've been on the new train, not particularly to this station. Right. So currently, like I said, because the battery technology is a work in progress, so we say, the station was slightly delayed, and there is only currently one train an hour. Well, they're still getting this battery technology train to work, and because it was they'd actually physically already put the train order in before they then decided they wanted so many fitted with this battery technology, meant there was a slight delay in actually getting the units as well. So once all the units are in, it'll, over the next few months, we're up to 2 an hour. There you go, Stephen Vose. So yeah, it's going to gradually increase over the next couple of months and get to 4 an hour.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll probably bring the presentation to an end now. But well, thanks for both of you presenting. I scribbled down. Well, I noted your use of historic maps, Callum. Making sure you know what it was built like before. The carbon challenge seems like you're addressing. The level boarding and how that works, not just at the platform. It's all through the kind of infrastructure. And more importantly, I get questioned every time I see a relative of mine, what's happening with Skemmed Station, and at least I've got an opportunity to say, well, we're one step closer, if nothing else. So thanks for your. We did only thank them in the normal way, which is a virtual clap or a physical clap, whatever you want to do. But there we are. Thanks a lot for presenting today. Thank you.
Just on your SCEM project, David, so you can let them know that, like I said, they have purposely put a bus route in to run from through scheme that takes you straight to this station. That's something they've done as part of this station,
Okay.
as an interim measure.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, excellent. Well, thanks everyone for attending. I think we'll